and welcome back to the Nonprofit Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gutzler, and today we are excited to introduce you to and have as our guest Andrew Steele, who is the Chief Development Officer at Global Refuge. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. Great to be with you.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the great organization that is Global Refuge and the fact that you guys have been around for like 85 years. That's amazing.
Yeah. I have not been, but I am glad to have been here for 5 of those 86 now years. And I started here in July of 2020, and that was a challenging environment, as you can imagine, being still in the pandemic and in an environment where the work of refugee resettlement and the work of welcome was still being challenged. We've kind of had our highs and lows since then, and we'll get into that during the conversation. I myself have been in nonprofit development my whole career, have always found this to really be a calling for me. It's something that I enjoy, I find interest in, I'm passionate about, people helping people. Humans helping humans, and allowing philanthropy to be that spark that really gets ideas going and ultimately impacts more people's lives. And so I've had the chance to work in higher education, at large national nonprofits, church denominations, and now with Global Refuge for the last 5 years. It's really been the honor of my life serving in this capacity and being a part of incredible moments of welcome over the last several years.
Wow. Thank you. That's an impressive background. So as you, as maybe our listeners are not familiar with Global Refuge and the fact you've been around for so long, can you maybe give us a little short history and maybe mention a few of the highlights that you just mentioned in passing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were founded in 1939, and actually we rebranded last year. So our name that maybe some folks would be familiar with is Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. So that's still who we are. We're doing business as Global Refuge under this new brand, and I can talk about that in a moment. But we started in 1939 essentially by Lutherans here in the United States who were welcoming Lutheran refugees from Europe due to the rise of fascism and Nazi Germany. And actually, at the end of World War II, 1 in 6 Lutherans worldwide was a refugee. And so it was very personal work to congregations and people of the Lutheran faith here in the United States to welcome literally their family members or neighbors or people from their communities. So we started in 1939 in New York. And ever since then, we have been a part of any major migration crisis that you can really imagine. And it really started in the mid-70s when, after the Vietnam War and the evacuation of folks from Southeast Asia to the United States, that's when LIRS at the time really grew and started growing their partnership with the U.S. government. Then in 1980, the U.S. Refugee Act was passed, which made this work of resettling refugees part of federal law, part of programs that we did through public-private partnerships with the State Department. And then any major crisis since then, we have been a major player in welcoming refugees. So whether that was the lost boys and lost girls of Sudan that many people I know are familiar with, folks from Liberia after the Civil War there, from Bosnia after the Civil War there. And then most recently, the Afghan evacuation in 2021, in August 2021. Really an unprecedented moment, hopefully a moment that we'll never have to experience again. But the evacuation of 80,000 Afghans from Afghanistan to the United States, where we had to come up with partnerships and programs literally overnight on how would we resettle these tens of thousands of folks who are just coming to a new country, many of whom had no connections, no family members, and had to start. And because of the generosity of so many individuals and churches and foundations and corporate partners, we were able to, our network, resettle 14,000 folks from Afghanistan in just a span of 3 months. That is usually the number that you resettle over 12 months. Like literally, we did it in 3 months. Our network, our affiliates, it was amazing. I still think, there should be peace prizes awarded to folks as part of that work because it was really incredible to see communities and we hired many folks to join our staff who actually were part of the evacuation themselves. Because one of the first things they said when they reached the United States was, hey, I want to work, I want to help out. What can I do to help folks coming? And so we were able to, the next year, support Ukrainians who were coming to the United States for safety during, once that war started, and continue to in different ways now. But we've always been doing the work of refugee resettlement.
Andrew, you just mentioned a variety of different groups of people and different countries that Global Refuge has helped settle as those folks have come in from a variety of different places. And the fact that your network is able to take care of those people. And as you mentioned, in some cases, several of those folks come in a very quick amount of time. And this is not like an official move where they're bringing all their stuff with them. They come with very little. And one of the things that is mentioned on your website, and I've definitely heard around before, is this concept of a long welcome. Can you help us understand a little bit about how one goes about settling refugees that are fleeing a country in most cases, and what a long welcome looks like?
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Mainly because that is going to be the focus for us moving forward. Because if you haven't heard or read, unfortunately, the U.S. refugee admissions program has been suspended indefinitely. Uh, there are no refugees coming to our shores currently. That program has been suspended by the administration, and it's really a sad day because this work has been done for decades. It's part of who we are as Americans. It's part of our country. It's part of the fabric of our country. And so I will talk about how it's done, because we do hope that we will find another day that refugee resettlement is back as a program and a public-private partnership. But as it stands currently, there are no legal pathways for refugees to enter the United States. And by the way, refugees are legal immigrants who come to the United States who go through extensive background searches and vetting. So, for example, how it all begins is an individual who is seeking safety for persecution due to their religion, or speaking out against authoritarian regime, or for gang violence, etc. They basically start an application for refugee status with either a United Nations office, with one of our consulates and embassies. They start a process by saying, here's my case of why I'm seeking refugee status somewhere. It doesn't necessarily just mean to the United States. There are other nations that resettle refugees, but that process has to begin overseas. It then could take years for that process to see its way through, because of all the security checks, background checks, and the vetting, extensive vetting that happens. So when refugees arrive to the United States, their migration journey is over. They have been displaced from their home. They've traveled to another country where they've been living in a refugee camp. The good news is when they get to the United States, they're done having to flee, and we can welcome them into their homes. So what we do, and our partners, our affiliates, and the work that we do, we find sponsors, co-sponsors, oftentimes faith communities or community groups in different communities around the country that say, hey, we'll sponsor a refugee family. So what will happen, we'll get a call and say, hey, we have a family of 5 coming from Ethiopia next week. So we got to get their apartment ready. We have to fill their fridge with food, and we got to be there at the airport. And it's a really powerful thing to be at an airport welcoming a newly arrived refugee, and the first thing you say to them when they step off the plane is, welcome home. And this is a home they have not yet known or seen or know anything about, perhaps, but it's this powerful notion of finally they're not running anymore. They've found safety. And so then through our programming, we have case managers who work with these families for months to help them get housing, stay in housing, enroll their children in school, connect them to job opportunities. That's one of the first things, getting housing and then getting a job. English as a second language is very important. Doing cultural training. So inviting groups together to tell them where the hospital is, where's the bank that they should consider going to, where's grocery stores that connect to their cultural foods, where are places of worship, and really doing like a welcome to America. Here's 101 of what you need to know. And we really depend on volunteers to really do a lot of this work as well. And that's why it's been a beautiful partnership for so long, because we can do this work efficiently. We do it by partnering with, like I said, faith communities and volunteers, and with the government. And these are folks who are incredible contributors to their communities. We have certain programs like a lending program, for example, where we're giving small loans to refugees and immigrants for personal loans or for business loans. And of course, they're all paying back their loans on time. They're on schedule, and they're starting businesses. The rate of entrepreneurship, right, is so much higher for folks who come into the United States with such resiliency and perseverance of having to go through what they've gone through. So it's really a successful program. The State Department actually even put out a report a few years ago that looked at the overall economic impact that refugees have had on the U.S. economy, and it's in the billions, a net positive in the billions of an economic impact. And so it's also just smart. It's not just the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do for us as the United States.
That is an enormous amount of work. I get the impression that your staff is not doing all those items, and that you probably have a whole team of, it has to be thousands of volunteers. So let's say hypothetically there's a listener that's listening to this podcast that's passionate about welcoming people to the United States, especially refugees. Could you give us a little insight on maybe how they could be involved in such a variety of ways that you support refugees when they arrive?
Definitely. And what I often tell communities who are interested in volunteering is sign up to volunteer with us or sign up for our newsletter, and you can always be informed of when there are tangible needs in your area. So if you go to globalrefuge.org, there's an action hub on our homepage. And if you follow that, there's a lot of options for you to get involved. One important piece of our work that I really want to lift up is advocacy. Because right now, for example, with the refugee resettlement program being suspended, there may not be airport pickups, right, happening, but we need individuals contacting their elected officials to say, we should bring this back. This should not be suspended. These are legal immigrants who've gone through extreme vetting. These are lawfully admitted people. We need to bring this program back, and we need more advocacy, not just to the federal government and your elected officials, but also to state and local officials as well. So that's a big thing that folks can do. Of course, we're also trying to connect options for people who are already here. So as part of that long welcome that I mentioned, just because you maybe came last year as a refugee doesn't mean all of a sudden you got it all under control, right? A new country, new community, you're still trying to learn the kind of lay of the land. And so we are looking for volunteers to help us specifically around our field office areas. We have a field office in the DMV area, so in Baltimore, that serves clients all around the DC metro Baltimore area. We have a field office in Fargo, North Dakota, and in San Antonio, Texas. Right now, we definitely have on the ground needs there, but we're also looking at connecting ways virtually that we can connect volunteers with some of our former clients. But I would say it's using your voice as an advocate right now is maybe the most important thing you can do.
So, as I hear about refugees in the general media or the general public, or the narrative or rhetoric about refugees, it seems like there's a lot of misinformation that I'm hearing out there in just kind of the general noise and what you're sharing with me. Can you maybe help us understand why that might be the case or what's going on?
Absolutely. And, we at Global Refuge will be the first to say that our immigration system is broken and we do need to fix it. Because also what happens is over time, there's just mass confusion around different visas, who's a refugee, who's an asylum seeker, who's an economic migrant, who's a climate refugee, who is a student visa holder, what's a special immigrant visa holder, right? It starts to get very confusing, almost on purpose, it seems, because then folks, unfortunately, do kind of generalize and say, well, they're all illegal immigrants. Well, refugees are the most, like I said, most vetted people on the planet. To get here, they've gone through extreme vetting, and there is no other, more surefire legal pathway for anyone to come to the United States. And so it is unfortunate that many of our former clients have to kind of live in fear or get attacked verbally or online or what have you, even though they've done it all the right way. So I think it's important for us to educate ourselves. We created a combating disinformation toolkit and a webpage on our website that you can also find links about all of the executive orders and how it impacts certain immigration populations in the United States. Because I think when we start to get overwhelmed by how confusing it all is, it's easy to step away and say, well, how can I make a difference on this big problem that I just don't understand? So we want to try to make it easy for people to understand. And asylum seekers, which you may hear about a lot, these are legal immigrants. They've gone through a process. They have turned themselves in when they come to the southern border and say, I am applying for asylum here in the United States. They then get a court date set and they work towards that court date. And then a judge says, yes, you have a case based on the evidence you provided, or no, you do not. But they are legally here when they come seeking asylum, and the government sets that court date for them. So there are so many misconceptions. And I think speaking truth to power is important. And the more that we can do to share the facts, and I had mentioned earlier that economic statistic, because I think it's important that we also look at the demographics in the United States and how immigrants are the solution to a lot of our problems. For example, we are seeing a decline in birth rates here in the United States. So the last census that was taken made the first drop in birth rates since we've started a census here. And we're already seeing it in countries like Italy, Japan, some of these other nations where they have an aging population. They're not having more than 2.3 children per household, and they are going to be in trouble economically and just all the other ways that you need a society to function. We have the ability and the advantage that people want to come here to the United States. And some of the most best and brightest people around the world want to come to our colleges, universities, want to come and work in our companies. And so for us to completely close down our borders and build walls and not bridges, it's really doing a disservice, not just to our communities from a humanitarian perspective, it's doing a disservice economically. And we will suffer the long-term consequences the longer that that's in place.
See, now that seems like it makes a lot of sense and very rational, and it's ways for us to see and know the variety and depth in which not only refugees but immigrants do make an amazing, wonderful, diverse contribution to our community. So thank you for helping us understand that. But one demographic you did not mention, which I know that you all serve, is the unaccompanied minors and how those individuals find their way here. Can you maybe say a little bit about what makes them slightly unique and the ways that you have to go and support them maybe slightly differently than some of the other groups that you support?
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up. I would be remiss not to talk about this because our work with unaccompanied minors has really increased over the last several years when we saw a massive increase of them coming to the U.S. So these are children under the age of 18 who come to the United States, most often the southern border, by themselves. So when we say unaccompanied, it's because they do not have a guardian or a legal guardian with them. They are by themselves. And what is happening is not over 90% of them are coming here to reunify with a parent or family member. So this is not, a mother coming and dropping off their child and saying, have a good life, good luck. It's their father's already here. Their mother's already here most of the time. So our work is, and again, in partnership with the federal government through HHS, our work helps reunify families. And it is work that is fighting against human trafficking because we make sure that these children are safe. So after the government takes them into their custody for a couple days to make sure that they, start a record on them, they get their name, where are you trying to go to, where are you coming from? They turn them into our custody and our care. And oftentimes we'll have foster families that take in the children for a short-term time, while our case managers then are looking for their relatives. And how are we going to connect a child in El Paso, Texas to their dad who lives in Seattle or their mom who's in Chicago? And then we ensure safe transport of the child to their relative. And then we do home visits afterwards to make sure that there's food in the house. The child's in school. There is no human trafficking happening. The child's not working if they're, a minor and aren't allowed to work. And so this is work that maybe isn't as well known, but but it's very important because these are children. And we cannot be a nation that just allows for thousands of children to kind of just be on the streets, right? And it really is actively working against human trafficking. We hear that a lot. I think people sometimes don't think about a lot of it has to do with work and working and getting trafficked through jobs and things like that. And so we all also work against that. Now, the capacity for that work has gone down just due to the fact that there are less people coming into the United States, but that still remains an important part of what we do.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, in addition to all of the work that you just mentioned to help the refugees, you mentioned in passing foster parents. And so, in this case, a unaccompanied minor would come into the country, but you also have an existing network of, I'm assuming, families and individuals that act as foster parents in existing service, like that's part of the work you do, and then you're able to bring those unaccompanied minors into the foster system as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so I mean, we're actively looking for new foster families, by the way, and we have a great video and a web page all about it. You have to apply and, of course, go through background checks and what have you. But we would rather have a family unit serve as a foster family as opposed to large facilities with hundreds of kids right in them, because we want the children to be children and to have access to education and safety. So we have long-term and short-term transitional foster care homes for our children, but we're always looking for more families who'd be willing to become foster parents.
So I can't imagine from my seat of privilege and the comfort that where I sit, having the experience of either being an accompanied minor and trying to make my way to find family in this country, or being a refugee, having to flee my house and home that I know for my entire life and then try and make a new home here in the United States. That's just an extraordinary experience, and it must be incredibly difficult to process. And so I know you all do some work with mental health and helping all the individuals which you serve process what they've gone through. Can you say a little bit about those additional resources that you provide for them?
Yeah, absolutely. No matter how you've come here as a refugee or an immigrant, it's been challenging and in some cases traumatic. Especially, for example, with the Afghan evacuation, basically an overnight evacuation where so many people had to leave family members behind. And so what we did early on with many of our Afghan clients is we did group therapy sessions where we invited small groups, women groups, men's groups to come together and let's just talk about your experience. And, not making it a formal thing that could be a little scary or intimidating, sit down with a therapist on a couch or whatever, right? It was no, let's sit in a circle in a fellowship hall of a church and just talk and talk it out. Now, we have created more formal mental health services where we were hiring clinicians and had therapists on staff to work with children, the unaccompanied minors, who either have gone through trauma directly or witnessed it on the journey here. I mean, just some horrific stories of what people have gone through. And all of that, knowing that this is still a better situation than the one they were fleeing. It really is heart-wrenching. I really encourage folks to get to know your immigrant and refugee neighbors, create friendships, and over time you may learn their stories. Or, visit our YouTube channel or our webpage, and we have a lot of stories that we've put up there as well. When you offer welcome, it is never forgotten. Some of the most powerful stories that we hear are former refugee families who 40 years later are still in touch with their sponsors and still talk about what it was like to be welcomed at the airport. And so, I think we want folks to not just survive here, we want them to thrive. And mental health services is a major need for those we serve. And we've been able to meet those needs with a small subset, but certainly that's something that we should continue to focus on.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing and giving us some additional clarity on that. So thinking about the interesting spot that Global Refuge is in right now, right? And kind of some change of policy by the current administration, but obviously still committed to the work that you do. What does the future look like for Global Refuge? If you want to, and that could be near term, because it feels like things are changing very rapidly as we do this recording in late spring, early summer of 2025. So maybe you could speak to like what's in store for the rest of this year, and then maybe as you could look out into the future, what are some of the ways that you feel Global Refuge is going to want to be trying to make an impact in the future?
Sure. It's a great question. We've been getting it a lot lately. And, the first few months of this year were extremely, extremely hard. We did have to make very hard decisions and were forced to close down programs, like I said, the refugee resettlement program. And that also meant saying goodbye to incredible staff and colleagues who have been part of this work for a long time. And while we feel like we've been beaten up a little bit in terms of just what we're able to do, we are not going anywhere. We've been here for 86 years. We've endured hardships in the past. We are innovating and rethinking how we meet the needs of our clients. So for this year, we will continue our work with unaccompanied minors, and we'll continue serving refugees who've already come here and immigrants through our field offices. Now, we've also started some new programs that are happening now that we really will be continuing to focus on in the future. One is we started a legal services team. The need for legal help is outside of housing and a job. That is like the next need that many immigrants have because it's confusing, right? What status do they actually qualify for? If they make one mistake on their application or miss their court date, they could be deported, right? So we started a legal services team to help our clients really figure out their pathway towards a permanent residency and citizenship. So that's brand new. We also started a few years ago our work in Central America. We call it Camino a Casa, a way home. This is a program helping youth, unaccompanied minors who actually were deported back to Guatemala. And we help them reunify their families there and integrate into communities, helping them with educational opportunities, job opportunities, essentially helping them stay at home. And none of the families there want to send their granddaughter or grandson or son north to the southern border. And I've had the chance to go twice now and met some of our amazing clients. By helping them access resources, whether that's clean water, agriculture project at their home, or like I said, education, they can stay in Guatemala, strengthen their family, strengthen their community. So that is now a focus of ours as well moving forward. Now, so much of what we do is funding dependent. So if we were to get the appropriate funding, we would launch our mental health services again. And we want to do that. I think we are still in right now the planning phase of how can we innovate programs to meet the needs of our clients. I had mentioned earlier our lending arm. So we do provide those microloans for personal and business loans to immigrants and refugees. You could have been here for 20 years as a former refugee. If you have a business idea and you need some seed capital to get it started, you can apply for a very, very low interest loan with us. It's a nonprofit. It's not a profit-making entity. And we've seen great success with that so far. So I think we're trying to fill in the gaps where the government cannot provide that support or will not, and areas that will keep us sustaining these programs so that, like I said, we're optimistic that refugee resettlement will come back. And we are ultimately a welcoming nation. Truly, that is who we are. And so we are going to endure this time with new programming, but we're optimistic about the future.
That's so great to hear. You got to be optimistic. You got to be thinking forward and committed to supporting those, especially who are having the biggest challenges. So thank you for that. If there are some listeners that you mentioned earlier about some ways that folks can volunteer, but if there's other ways that you could share with us how to go about supporting Global Refuge, whether that's a monetary gift, is there anything really big that you're looking for right now, or even on the smaller level, like what's the best way to just kind of get oriented into the volunteer core? Could you share a little bit about that for our listeners?
Absolutely. Of course, mission needs money. And at the end of the day, we have been too dependent on federal funding in our history, and we need to diversify our revenue for these programs. So a gift of any size would really help us meet the needs of our clients and impact lives. Of course, we encourage folks to consider making a monthly gift, or if there's a certain program that really interests you, to support that program directly. I will also say that, don't underestimate the power of a like on Facebook or on social media, or sharing one of our posts. We want to get the word out there. So if there's a video that you really like, share it with your network, both online and just with your family and friends. If you want to create a peer-to-peer fundraising platform and help us raise money with your network, we're looking for people to join us in this work. And that's a fun way, whether to celebrate a birthday or do a 5K or get involved in some way with us that way. And we do have a newsletter you can sign up on our webpage, globalrefuge.org, where we send every Friday actually a newsletter of kind of, here are things that have happened this week in immigration, here we are in the news, or here are the stories we would love for you to see. And I think just starting to educate yourself and reading up on this. Of course, there are all these articles in the papers and in the news, and again, it could get very confusing. We're trying to make it easier for you to digest. So would encourage just staying connected with us on social media, signing up for a newsletter, and of course, would welcome any kind of gift that anyone would want to make.
Excellent. Is there anything that we missed, or anything else that you wanted to mention or bring up as part of just a better awareness of what Global Refuge is and what it does for our community?
Yeah. I think now is such an important time in our nation's history, and for individuals and communities to really stand with the causes that they care about. So this is about protecting certain institutions, but more so, if we think about who are the most marginalized in our communities, who are truly living in the shadows or on the margins, immigrants and refugees, unfortunately, are most likely those individuals. And how do we want history to judge us at this time, right? That's why I'm part of this work. I love fighting for the underdog. And I think this is an American story of standing with immigrants, refugees, and those who are seeking safety. And I think now is the time to stand with the causes that you care about and be more vocal about supporting the causes you care about. If you hear someone who might be saying something that's not really true about refugees, if you feel like you've read up enough and you can kind of correct them, I think it's our time to start doing that. Because when misinformation starts to really fly about, and narratives start to form that are simply not true, it could be hard to turn that around. And so I think we just need to continue to speak truth to power and stand with those that you care about.
Well said. That's great. Wonderful note to end on. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do individually for Global Refuge, and the way that you are connected to lots of different communities across our region and nationwide. But also thank you and your whole staff for the amazing heavy lift and work that you all do on a regular basis, especially in this time of transition. It's not easy. We hear that, we know that, but from all of us and the listeners, thank you for everything that you do.
Thanks so much. That means a lot. It truly does.